Welcome to my YouTube channel Safety Guidelines. My name is Fahim Azam and I shall share some safety tips for working in confined spaces. This topic is quite lengthy, so it is divided into two videos. The contents of the first part are confined spaces, and their hazards, three ways to control hazards, managing and controlling hazards, developing a confined space entry plan, preparation phase. Confined spaces. If you are involved in confined space entry or your job requires you to enter a confined space, an area not normally intended for human occupancy that has limited access and poor ventilation and lighting, like a tank, vessel, duct, vault, manhole, or pit. You need to be fully trained in confined space entry procedures. Fatalities and serious injuries are a risk not only to workers inside a confined space but also the rescuers. In fact, the majority of workers who die after entering confined spaces are those attempting to rescue co workers. Confined spaces and their hazards. Understanding the term confined space is critical and in identifying and managing the hazards associated with entering, performing tasks inside, and safely exiting any space that is designated as confined space as any space or structure that number 1 has limited or restricted means of entry or exit. Number 2 is not designed for human occupancy. Number 3 contains or has the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere. Number 4 contains any other recognized serious safety or health hazard. A confined space is not necessarily small and can be above or below the ground. Some confined spaces are easy to identify, such as underground vaults, tanks, pits, sewers, and vessels. Others may be less obvious, such as when working in an excavation deeper than 4 feet. Hazard controls in three ways. Control confined space hazards when it is not possible to design out confined space hazards. Work conducted in a confined space must be appropriately planned and managed. Engineering and administrative controls, and as a last resort, the use of personal protective equipment can help manage confined space hazards. Number 1, engineering controls. If entry is unavoidable, implement common confined space engineering control measures, including purging and ventilating the atmosphere inside the space. Purging is the process of clearing the confined space atmosphere of contaminants by displacing them with air, steam, or inert gas. Ventilation, mechanical or natural, is the process of moving uncontaminated fresh air through the space. Number 2, administrative controls. Administrative controls acknowledge the presence of hazards but attempt to minimize employee contact or exposure to them. They can include the use of an entry permit system, gas testing the atmosphere, training, and detailed written confined space entry requirements. Entry into a confined space can be done safely if the following safety precautions are taken. Provide proper training to confined space entry to all personnel involved. Ensure proper confined space entry procedures are followed. Provide proper supervision of confined space entry. Develop and implement an effective emergency response plan. Number 3. Personal protective equipment. When engineering and administrative controls cannot reduce or eliminate the hazard, the use of appropriate personal protective equipment becomes the only barrier between the hazard and the entrant. Appropriate confined space PPE includes respirators and special clothing in addition to safety glasses, goggles, safety shoes, and hard hats. Managing and controlling hazards, so developing a confined space entry plan. Requirements for managing and controlling hazards in confined space include developing a confined space entry plan prior to entry into the space. The plan should include conducting confined space entry hazard identification that takes into account the nature of the work that will be performed, the number of people involved, the nature of the substance contained within the space, and the configuration and location of the confined space. Ensuring that all personnel involved in confined space entry are properly trained. Identifying and defining the necessary controls that are required to eliminate or mitigate the potential hazards. Ventilation and elimination requirements, need for equipment isolation, lockout and use of hold tags, frequency of atmospheric gas testing. PPE requirements, emergency response and rescue plans, emergency equipment. For example, at least one 30-pound fire extinguisher must be provided near each designated confined space entry. If the space is within process equipment or where combustible or flammable materials may be present, carbon dioxide, CO2 type fire extinguishers should not be used inside enclosed confined space. Next topic is preparation phase. Preparing a confined space prior to entry is critical for any safe confined space entry operation. To ensure safe entry, the following preparations are required. Properly isolating the space or vessel from all sources of energy. For example, process lines and electrical power. Removing contaminants such as hazardous materials and iron sulfide deposits from the space by purging or steam washing as required. Remove toxic atmospheres and ensuring positive ventilation through the use of mechanical ventilators. Conducting the appropriate tests for combustible toxic gases and oxygen by a certified gas tester. Recording the results prior to entry, after breaks or interruptions, and at periodic intervals during the work. Additional atmospheric monitoring must be conducted if other hazards such as carbon monoxide and naturally occurring radioactive materials are suspected. Eliminating or controlling all sources of ignition, for example, sparks or open flames. Identifying the means of egress and communication, including notifying emergency rescue services. Posting signs, barricades, and the confined space entry permit outside the confined space to notify personnel that a confined space entry is in progress and to prohibit unauthorized entry. Stationing a properly trained and equipped standby man outside the confined space during work to remain in contact with those inside. Ensuring proper rescue equipment such as lifelines, harness, and hoist is available when entering a confined space deeper than 6 feet. Communicating the confined space entry plan to all entrants and the standby man. GFCI ground fault circuit interrupters must be used with all electrical powered equipment inside a confined space. Thank you for watching my video. Please click the subscribe button, press the bell icon to receive notifications regarding further videos. Like, comment and share my video clips. See you in the second part of confined space entry. Till then, have a good time. Bye.